fishing. Nothing beats sitting on the water, getting out your tackle, casting your rod, and waiting for that big game's bite. As I always say, we need a 6-month fishing trip twice a year. Now, I've caught every fish in the 7 seas. Catfish, goldfish, starfish, hootie and the blowfish. But none compare to that oh-so-sweet, succulent aquatic delicacy that is the cod. Particularly the Atlantic cod. Especially as a humble Canadian man such as myself, I have trouble resisting these bug-eyed, spotted sons of b****s. Only problem was that everyone loved them too. You see, the cod market became so big that it eventually burst and drove these species to near extinction. That's right. The fish that those stinking Brits have been using for ages to make their Binla mega chippies are almost as endangered as the panda, which deserves its fate because they're so stupid they commonly sit on their children and crush them to death. Ahoy ahoy, I'm John, and I always assumed that the cod was as common as a problematic celebrity in Hollywood, but apparently they had a whole mortuarium for these things, which for all you non-word fans out there, is a temporary prohibition of an activity. Now, what made Johnny Law come in and say that you can no longer catch one of the most commonly exported fish in the country? Well, it all started in the 70s, when men weren't getting their groove on the disco clubs or doing a lot of drugs. They're out in their fishing boats, wrangling up some fish for a bit of cash at the end of the week. One of the most commonly exported fish, as said before, was the codfish, particularly in provinces like Ottawa and Newfoundland. Now, it was no secret that the cod population was dwindling. Many marine biologists had observed how this rate of cod was unsustainable, but no one listened to them because they sound like unhygienic hippies. And the world needs more tackle boxes and less Xboxes, damn it. They only listened to the big officials, and they were like, "Yep, it's fine," they said in front of the completely empty body of water. Now, the already fragile population was not helped by the fact that the future was upon them. It's the 70s, and even if medical technology looked like this, they sure were getting good at fishing. Before, all they had was small, rickety fishing boats like dories, schooners, and punts, which no, are not all Cockney slang terms. But now, they are using these big longliners, which, as the name suggests, you could go fishing for longer amounts of time. The speed of these longliners also meant you could reach the big schools of fish faster, meaning you weren't spending half the day telling old sea shanties to your mateys, you were actually catching the fish. It wasn't just the boats, mind you. Nets got wider, traps got bigger, and sea captains got hairier. Tools on these boats were evolving rapidly. I mean, Inspector Gadget doesn't have as many tools as these scurvy dogs did. One such device was a longline, which is not a longliner, that's the big boat, okay? The longline was like a regular fishing line, except there were more lines, therefore more fish. Easy math. First of all, for our cod friends, the days of relying on the sail were over. Now everyone had these big engines and motors all on their industrial-grade fishing boats, which meant a little bad weather wouldn't stop the daily grind. That's all for catching the fish. You need to find them first. Unfortunately for the cod, they were being tracked by these new radar systems. The same kind of technology the military used to track Nazi warboats, they were using that to hunt down these little buddies. No cod was safe from these fish-finding machines. They assumed the blue depths was their domain, but we had it mapped, scanned, and under lock. Now they know how my uncle feels with the ankle bracelet they gave him for what he did in '09. With all these newfangled gizmos and gadgets against them, the fish just couldn't keep up, and the numbers dipped worse than those environmentalist nerds predicted. But it didn't stop there. See, it wasn't just Canadians getting in the local cod phenomenon. A lot were from boats of other countries who wanted a piece of that pie. You had ones from France, Spain, and even the Soviet Union. I mean, if the population couldn't handle the humble folk of Canada, just imagine how bad it got from all these extra hands coming in to take another cookie from the cookie jar. Us Canadians were too polite to tell our neighboring countries to f*** off until 1977, where we extended our 200-mile limit. Yahoo! Hooray for personal boundaries! Eventually, the International Commission for the Northwest Atlantic Fisheries tried to establish a quota that would hopefully halt the industry from turning into that one Chuck E. Cheese game where you're in that box with like the fan blowing and there's tickets all over and you have to grab them before the time runs out. Cod population continued to drop throughout the 80s until the 90s, where it got so bad the government had to step in and establish the mortuarium. By that point, the damage had already been done and the cod population had gone down by 80%. Now, if you know anything about ecosystems, then you'll know that even a small change can have catastrophic consequences for the surrounding wildlife. Cod typically eat smaller fish like herring and mackerel, as well as an assortment of shellfish, which meant they were in abundance without their predator. On the flip side, the cod's natural predators like the spiny dogfish and larger marine mammals had less rations, meaning the entire population was affected, a Jenga tower crashing down to the carpet. Now you may be saying, well, I'm not an ecosystem, so why should I care? Well, you land-loving losers, the collapse of the cod industry also affected the workers. With no fish to catch, many lost their livelihoods. Exactly over 3,000 were without a job, and many of the humble fishing towns that relied on the fish were abandoned. They may look really cool now, but I assure you this is very sad. I mean, imagine if your father was just all about fishing cod, and then it dried up and you had to leave your cool fishing town where everyone was the dad from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. This story tells a lesson of human greed having great consequences. To bring this home, I'd like to use an old thing called an analogy. Remember on Halloween when people would be out so they just leave the bucket with candy with the sign that says only take one? Well, we're all the rotten kid who had just scarfed down the entire bowl, leaving all the other trick-or-treaters empty-handed. And we need to stop being that kid because he's a snotty-nosed brat and no one loves him. Also, we need to stop evolving in technology and just wall us off from all the other countries. That's all. Good night. Bye.